Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 219 of Rush Roundtable. Today, we're going to be talking about Virtuality from the album Test for Echo. This is one of my favorite Rush songs, certainly a very polarizing one. We have a very, very awesome panel here with some Roundtable regulars and a brand new guy. We got Paul Simon, we got Liam, Paul C, and we got Alex. And then joining us for the first time, we have Michael from Michael's Record Collection. Welcome aboard.
Hey, good to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, super excited to be talking about the song with you guys today. Before we get into the episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a tip down on Ko-fi so you can help support the page. Also, don't forget to check out our sponsors down in the description. So, before we get into this discussion proper, it's kind of impossible to deny that Virtuality is one of the most controversial Rush songs in their entire discography. The lyrics of this song have been the topic of debate for basically ever since the album came out, with a discussion on if they've aged poorly, if they're really just cheesy and stupid, or if they actually have a little bit of something to them. And I feel like this has caused so much discussion around this song that it's kind of just like I feel like it's important for us to kind of be on even ground while we talk about this. You know, there's a lot of bias that could be present when we talk about this. So I kind of just want to get a feel for the panel right now. Kind of what's your general like opinion of Virtuality? You know, we don't have to go super in depth, but for me, you know, I really enjoy the song. I think the riffs are great. I think the lyrics have a lot to say. I just think it's a really, really solid song. So, Liam, what do you think?
I think when we look at it lyrically, I think it's a bit ahead of its time when it's talking about being connected to the digital world, and I also should add Neil's work on this with a bit of Tom feels going on towards the end of the song. Really neat.
Hey, Alex, what about you?
Well, immediately when I listened to the album when I bought it, in September of '96, I loved the riffs. They hit right away. Lifeson's guitar was much more, energetic. Yes, I will admit when they got to that chorus, I was sitting there like, what? So there was that aspect where back then I was thinking, but when I saw them play live in the summer of July of '97, it was just a punch in the face. It was just awesome. The energy coming off the stage from the live version of that was undeniable. I'm like, yeah, lyrics, whatever. I've never written better lyrics. Who am I to judge at that point? Love it.
Awesome. Paul C, what about you?
Funny enough, this is not my top five on the album. It hasn't. It's a solid song. It's a good song. I and has it aged well? I think it does. Considering this was written in what 96, right? So the internet only came out in 94, if I'm not mistaken. So I mean, this is really this infancy of the internet age. And I think it still applies today. I just went through the lyrics again earlier and I went, yeah, this kind of, it still fits today. Like, it kind of had like at the Alex cringy little, that first time you heard it, kind of go, oh, okay, this is kind of, but then you kind of like, it grows on you, right? And then now I can see it with a whole new light. But no, it's still a great song. Like I said, that guitar riff just catches your attention right away. Like, it's like, okay, it's a good upbeat and but yeah, no, I'd say it's a positive. It's a good song. I like it.
Awesome. Michael, what about you?
First time that I heard Test for Echo, I this was the song that stood out for me right away. It's my favorite song on the album. I'll get that out of the way, and it is one of my favorite Rush songs. And I know that puts me in a minority, but that's the controversy for me is why more people aren't smart enough to realize this is a great song.
Awesome. Paul, what about you?
It's sort of Alex touched on it. I saw it live too. I was actually at the Different Stages show in Tinley Park, Illinois. So I missed out on Time in Motion. That was the song that got rotated out to put Virtuality in, or to put it in that slot, I should say. But it absolutely killed live. And it came right after the Trees on the set list. I saw it. So you're in one place and then suddenly, da-na-na, so it cranked. I got a quote I found from an interview with Steve Streeter from a show of fans in summer of '97, where was talking to Neil, and he said, I have to ask one question about Virtuality. While the song's lyrics are not a negative take on the internet, they do echo a bleak existence for the net boy and net girl who relies on the net for virtually everything. Is this thing out of control? Where do you see the internet going in the next few years? Even after your letter in Modern Drummer explaining the problems you had with the net, so-called Rush fans continue to blast you for your decision. I frankly don't understand their motives. Neil's answer is, me too neither. However, like religion, it seems to be a subject which does not permit any infidels, especially laughing infidels. Virtuality has to be understood as satire, a species almost as endangered as irony in these times, and thus I have used a certain amount of exaggeration to try and puncture the exaggerations of those who have made a new religion out of this thing. Like Test for Echo, this song has an unspoken commentary on its subject and a generous whack of irony lurking behind all the miracles it describes. In answer to the narrator's claims in Virtuality, that tacit comment is, no, you can't. So, worth noting.
Hey, that's a pretty incredible insight from, the man himself. It's kind of interesting as you start to look through these lyrics and you start to apply a degree of irony to them, at least with the actual words that are in the song compared to the actual meaning. I think it makes the messages a lot more digestible. But, you know, let's see that. Let's see that in motion as we kind of go through the lyrics. So we start off with a super, super punchy intro. As we all most of us talked about it in our little intro thing. Super, super punchy guitar riff right at the start. Really fast, really energetic. Um, Kind of setting it apart from a couple of the other riffs on the album. While the album still has a pretty like heavy rocking pace, a couple of the tracks coming before this one were a little bit slower. So it's exciting to see them pick up the pace a little bit, crank up the gain, and like really put it up front. So into the verse, we have a little verse right at the top. Like a shipwrecked mariner adrift on an unknown sea, clinging to the wreckage of the lost ship Fantasy. I'm a castaway stranded in a desolate land. I can see the footprints in the virtual sand. So right up at the top, a lot of interesting imagery, kind of about ships and marine life. Any of you guys got something to say about that?
One thing that hit me within the last couple of weeks of thinking about this is that I feel like the future was reaching backwards, grabbing this line and saying, you're going to write a song called The Wreckers, and that's going to basically have this imagery of a shipwrecked mariner on an unknown sea. And I just thought, I wonder, it made me think of this, I'm drawing a blank as far as our late night hosts, but when Rush was on Steve
Colbert.
Thank you.
Oh, Stephen Colbert
Yeah,
show.
when he was on the Colbert Show and he asked the question of them, you've written long songs. Have you ever written a song so long that you wound up influencing yourself? And honestly, I feel like Neil's lyrics were influencing himself. And why wouldn't they? That's, as I say, that's just something that hit me within the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's a theme of exploration. They've written some of their earliest and most beloved material involved exploration. That's what this is. That's the motif on this entire song. Is this, this new frontier, this new thing this new vast expanse. We're going to see all kinds of verbs and nouns and adjectives and adverbs about exploring this unknown commodity / space.
Yeah, we have that first instance of what Neil said in that Steve Streeter interview here with I can see the footprints in the virtual sand. No, you can't.
Exactly. You don't know how big it's going to get.
We're all kind of going in it blind, really, because it's a new frontier, so we kind of really have no idea. We're all blind baby steps.
Yeah, I have a little interesting. I was just thinking about this, the last line of it. I can see the footprints in the virtual sand. One very big concern I've kind of noticed with my generation is this concept of the digital footprint and what that could mean for like job opportunities. Which, if you don't know, basically a digital footprint means pretty much anything you do online is kind of saved and can be accessed really at any point. So I see this line of I can see the footprints in the virtual sand, at least thinking about it in a more modern context and applying it to like today is, you see the lives people lead on social media and just kind of throughout the internet. And regardless of what those things actually mean, those pictures that you post, those stay up there. And, uh, those have like lasting impacts in the real world too. Not saying you post a picture of you and your family and suddenly everything's set ablaze, but you know, stuff that happens on social media is saved around. It has consequences. That's what I
Tell
see
it,
this as.
tell it to James Gunn. 10 years after he posted something, he got fired for it. After he apologized for it. So, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
some pretty big footprints there. But but yeah. So that's really it for the first verse. Then we move into the oh so controversial chorus. Here we go. Net boy, net girl, send your signal around the world. Let your fingers walk and talk and set you free. Net boy, net girl, send your impulse round the world. Put your message in a modem and throw it in the cyber sea. So before we get into the lyrics, I want to briefly touch on the music, at least in this section. Um, Coming off of the really upbeat verse, and the verse had a little switch up in the second half of the lyrics. We forgot to mention that. It still maintained a pretty solid, fast tempo. Um, in the chorus here, we see kind of pulling back a little bit in the top half, really like bringing it back and then going back into full force, like in the second half of the chorus. I think it's a really, really cool part musically, and I think the band does a really good job of just building back up dynamically. Now the lyrics. You know, net boy, net girl, put your message in a modem. Like, I'll be the first to admit that, like, when I heard put a message in the modem, like, as someone who was born in like 2002, I kind of was like, what? But I guess in a literal sense, the lyrics have possibly aged a little bit. But I think the lyrics here are really, really cool. Just about like, let your fingers walk and talk. Just the idea, just the imagery of like fingers typing on a keyboard, sending your impulse around the world. It's just super cool. And honestly, I think it paints a pretty like interesting image of the internet and kind of communication, just everything that it allows. But what do you guys think about the chorus?
I'll
Okay,
come
Paul's
back
got
to that
something.
boy, that girl before I lose it. But let your fingers walk and talk. Okay, gentlemen who are slightly older on the panel, let your fingers do the walking. We know that saying. Not you, Paul, you're young. But yeah, let your fingers do the walking was a slogan. We heard it a lot when we were slightly younger. That's a thing. Also, put your message in a modem. Okay, you've heard gateways. How much have you heard the phrase gateway used? Modem is you get a modem and a router, there's your gateway. That's not a dated term. Modulate, demodulate, we're still using that technology today to convert the signal, combine the signal, go from analog to digital. We're still doing that. So it's not a dated technology. So that's when people say it's dated. I get that we don't hear certain words as often, but technically, if you want to get specific, it's not that dated. Although I
Yes,
do
I
have
would
to
like to
laugh.
point out that I do know what Wi-Fi technology is. I'm not a total Luddite. YouTube
No,
commenters.
Yeah.
what I'm saying is when it's explained, people do know. They go, "Oh, of course." So that's my point. Is that yeah, when it's explained or pointed out, yeah. And then the net boy, net girl thing. Michael, you probably know it as well, and I don't want to take away from things you've got lined up. So if you know about Elton, please go ahead.
No, I mean, I know the let your fingers do the walking thing was what Yellow Pages, right?
Yes.
Was the,
Yep.
the advertisement for that. The thing about this chorus, there's a couple of things that really stand out to me. One is that, and I think this is what Ryder was talking about with the scaling it back, the heavy guitar riff, which by the way, Alex told Guitar One that Virtuality is a riff he considered to be a signature Rush riff, along with the likes of Limelight, Spirit of Radio, Free Will, Stick It Out, Tom Sawyer. And you get that acoustic guitar in the chorus, and it's kind of unusual to go from heavy to a little lighter in the chorus, but I think it works really well. The other thing that I love about this is how Geddy's vocal, I know there's a term for this, I don't know what it is. It's like the opposite of an echo. It's like he starts to sing put your message in a modem before the pocket where the lyric really goes. And I would love to know how that came about and who was responsible for that decision, because that's probably one of those things that hardly ever works, and it worked really well on this one.
Might be like a vocal delay, maybe.
It's like it's a doubling up, but it's off sync.
Yeah, and it's
maybe
two
like
separate
maybe
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
two separate vocals too.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's definitely the vocal overdubs in here. I mean, I do have a score handy here, and certainly when he brings in the net boy net girl, it is a straight ahead vocal line. There's a lot of scooping up to notes, basically just using some great grace notes in there. But then by the time you put your message in a modem, they are looking at more harmony, pretty much just going through it quickly. I'm looking at a lot of harmony in fourths and mostly fourths. Well, a little bit. Okay. Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay. No, those aren't fourths. That's actually just he raises it up. So I was kind of reading it wrong. But I mean, one of the things I can't help but think about too, like with this riff, I got to draw it back to that for a sec. Um, kind of like Tom Sawyer, and some of us were talking about that last week or a couple weeks ago on different online world. You know, it's kind of E major, but he plays a lot of notes and make it E minor. He's basically playing E major and E minor at the same time. And he's landing on basically an E7 chord, but Geddy's got a low A in the bass. The E7, if he extended it just with his pinky, he could turn it into the Hendrix chord, a 7#9. And that's something that they started doing a bit more in the 90s. Certainly, they did it a lot in counterparts where Geddy's got a low root, Lifeson plays a higher voice. So they are orchestrating more in a way. So it's not just, oh, Lifeson's got an E, Geddy's got an E. And at that point, the what would have been the second half of the verse, pre-chorus, it's a short verse, then a pre-chorus. That's where Lifeson comes in with overdubbed harmonics that kind of open it up, and that's something he began using. He used quite a bit on I can't think tonight, Snakes and Arrows. But also, yeah, this chorus for the guitar just opens up into that strum, but it's still like bringing in some 16th notes. It seems more easygoing. It's not as passing tone and frenetic as the riff, but it's more like it's still a chorus where it opens up and you can latch on to the voice. So the guitar, you know, E minor, G, you know, full measure, just to strum that 16th note basically. Just saying. I'll be quiet. I'll pass that
And
back.
and we talked about, the word modem supposedly being dated. Now, if he'd used the word dial-up, then we'd be calling it dated.
Right.
But this is mode, you know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Thank you.
Modems, modem.
And before I lose track, sent the message out to Cybersea, message in a bottle is I lost that train of thought before I passed it on, but yeah, there's the symbolism he was going for. And remember our album themes. It wouldn't be me if I didn't bring it up. The whole is there anybody out there? The fact that he's writing satire, but that's the whole idea behind this is this whole new world. Is there anybody even there? So, and since I didn't want the point to get lost, but he's paying with Net Boy Net Girl, he's paying homage to Elton Metello's 1977 English punk new wave tune Jet Boy Jet Girl, which I want to send an anonymous shout out to the fine gentleman in Neil Peart Pavilion who flagged down me, Nick, and Eric Winter from the channel last year and tried telling me that something else was the inspiration for it. No, it was actually Jet Boy Jet Girl from Elton Metello in 1977, and I'll leave it at that. So, at any rate, it's a story for another time and a much smaller viewing audience. But that being said, yeah. So the chorus in and of itself fits this whole exploratory new frontier idea really well.
Awesome.
Yeah. Before we move on, I'm not like I wish I could participate more in the music nerd part of this, but I read in Guitar Shop, Geddy had said that he used a detuned E string on his Fender jazz bass on Virtuality, Color of Right, and Dog Years. And I wondered from maybe Alex can explain what that sort of means and how it fits in there.
That I'm not familiar with, actually. I mean, needless to say, bass has to be, and Ryder knows this too, bass
Mhm.
has to be, really in tune because bass is giving us our roots, our root
Mhm.
note. I mean, Geddy, certainly for this album, I mean, the opening track is the whole guitar is down a whole step, which in today's parlance is D standard.
Yeah.
But it's standard tuning down a whole step is really what we used to call it. And Getty, in many cases, he would just detune, like with a lot of bass players, you could just detune, go into drop D because you're playing single notes. Whereas for that, Lifeson had to be completely lower because he was playing full chords. Certain songs like Stick It Out were in drop D, so he could get more of that kind of riffing style. So I'm not sure if that's what Getty was going for at that point, because obviously, even if the song's in E, like Time and Motion, for instance, that's an E. If he was doing something there, well, if you wanted to reach that low flat seven, that's where your drop D could help. But yeah,
Mhm.
I actually, even though it might be the Guitar Shop magazine that I actually have, I don't recall that.
I think it might be him either playing in, I'm pretty sure Virtuality is in, it might be drop D. I've learned how to play it in just standard.
Mm,
But I do know of a lot of songs on this album where he either plays in drop D or in that D standard.
yeah,
So that might be what that's referring to.
it makes sense. I mean, this,
Definitely, if there is any like heavy songs on this album that would benefit from having drop D, this is one of them.
but I
Oh yeah.
mean, and that's that would lock in with the idea that some of Lifeson's high chords and Getty's bass note might be a little different. But I
Hmm.
mean, certainly Lifeson's riff is absolutely beginning with that opening. I mean, the first three notes are Day Tripper, basically.
Yeah, don't,
But
don't, don't.
yeah, just basically E, G, G sharp, and then he moves into a mixture of sharps and he throws in the B flat, then he's got the flatted seven and he's, as they say, he's very E, much
Hmm.
like Tom Sawyer, it's kind of E major, but hey, there's an awful lot of E minor. Yes, they're basically doing the major and the minor at the same time.
Hmm.
Beatles did that.
Hey. All right, so moving out of the chorus, we have a second verse right here. We got a little part right here. Astronauts in the weightlessness of pixelated space exchange graffiti with a disembodied race. So we're coming right back out with the heavy verse riff. Another great imagery for just the vastness of the internet, the astronauts kind of floating around in pixelated space. I love that lyric too. Once again, another like really great bit of imagery. And then coming off of that, we have pre-chorus. This is another section with the overdubbed harmonics. Neil kind of plays a slightly more off-kilter groove, and Getty's playing this super cool flamenco part. And the lyrics here are, I can save the universe in a grain of sand. I can hold the future in my virtual hand. So this little section here, I guess we'll just, for the sake of time, combine this verse and this pre-chorus together. Coming out of the chorus, what are you guys thinking right now?
More of the same. It reinforces what we've said already, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Yeah, exploration travel into a new dimension.
Just continuing on with that, it's just super, super cool how much Neil can kind of revisit an idea and just reframe it in a different context and just
Yeah.
bring it into a whole new way. It's just super cool. Um,
And
Coming off of
this is
this,
Neil too, channeling his love of literature too, because he's got William Blake references in there with I can save the universe in a grain of sand. I can hold the future in my virtual hand, which echoes uh, William Blake's Auguries of Innocence, the first and third line. To see a world in a grain of sand is the first line, and the third line of that poem is hold infinity in the palm of your hand.
oh,
That's the stuff I missed, and that's the stuff I love. Thank you
that's
for
the
that.
great catch. That's awesome.
Nice one.
I did not catch
Hey,
that. I love it.
wow. So yeah,
That's
there's a lot of really great influence coming into this track. That's a good catch. Sweet. So coming off of that verse and pre-chorus section, we have another chorus coming off. It's the same lyrics as last time. Then we enter a bridge section. Musically, we kind of enter a more similar realm of the pre-chorus with the more off-kilter groove. Getty's playing his flamenco, and Alex is he's not necessarily doing the harmonics. I don't think in this part he's kind of doing something a little
No.
bit more off-kilter. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then in this section, we have the lyrics, let's dance tonight to a virtual song. Press this key and you can play along. Let's fly tonight on our virtual wings. Press this key to see amazing things, to see amazing things. So what do we think about this bridge section right here?
Oh,
again the satire idea. It just seems, it feels very tongue in cheek, And we know that Neil, with lyrics, was all about the being in. Listening to the world premiere is what made me think of this for the album's world premiere. Um, Neil talked about reality versus virtual reality or versus a fake reality, and you can't smell the smells, and you can't. And that lyric is going to come up and get a little ahead of myself. But this whole idea of instant gratification, press this key, and you'll see all these things. Press, let's dance to a virtual song. It almost reminds me of like instant messaging back then, where it was just fire a message off, and that was the first time we could ever do something like that. So that was that instant gratification of boom, pressing a key, off it goes. There's a thought and communication. Remember the 738-55 rule: 7% verbal, 38 voice, 55% body language. And with this new form of communication, we're totally cutting out all nonverbal communication, and actually you're not even getting voice tone. So all you're getting now is at most 7% through these words. So just something to consider in all this.
Which is why it was really easy to get into an argument with people when it's like, no, I didn't mean that.
Cursor to
Look
text.
how far we've come.
Yeah.
Still the same problems.
No, I also think musically, Lifeson is kind of applying some of his use with the mandola that he started certainly overdubbing onto the Victor album. Because this section, he's basically playing a D unison, open D string, fretted 5th fret D. Then he's got some kind of, dare I say, funky sort of high notes. And again, funky white Canadians. The idea is that seems like a new song. I think Paul C is going to get on that one, get a groove going. But basically, yeah, you could sort of see where they go into this century with some of the songs on Snakes and Arrows and certainly Clockwork Angels, some of the these harmonics or some of these 16th notes that he really kind of puts in for just a driving part, essentially.
Nice. So coming off of this bridge, we have a really cool guitar solo section. Before we get into the solo, rhythm section gets a little bit more animated here. We start to get a little bit more consistent with the more verse riff. Getty throws in some pretty slick bass drops if you listen pretty closely. But Alex plays a pretty cool solo here, pretty unique. Anybody got anything to say about the solo?
Well, obviously, no, I have nothing to say. It's basically what, 10 measures. So he has like an 8. I think a 2-measure phrase repeated 4 times, but he has kind of a slight more involved variation for the first 2 measures through. So it's essentially more of like more of kind of just like an instrumental interlude that it's just got a consistent melodicism to it. So he isn't really ripping on a solo. He's not going buck wild. He's just basically, he's got a melody that he plays that is perfect for where we are. This wasn't a song that required an old school pentatonic solo. It's, hey, we got this melody, let's do it up for all these measures and just keep going, keep the energy flowing, basically.
Send that message out there.
And they are fans of the Police, so that message is no longer in a bottle. It's on all sorts of media. SD card's too small and gets blurred out. Anyway.
Yeah, it's really the melody that they're playing. It's a little bit more like in line with the harmonics that he's playing in the pre-chorus. I can, especially if you listen to it, the live version from the Different Stages DVD that was never released, but I think on R40, the like special edition, it was eventually put out there. In the version, that live version, it comes out way clearer. So then coming out of the guitar solo, we get this really, really cool, just couple bar break of I think it's Getty and Alex going back and forth, just these really cool drops that have a dope like delay effect on them, and it's just kind of interesting, especially considering like how driving the rest of the song has been. Like it's had its moments of slowing down, but just this very sudden, just boom, 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 boom. It's just such a really cool moment. I'm so jealous that some of you guys got to see this live, because that had to be like one of the tightest transitions coming out of a solo, I'd imagine. But coming after that, we have here a little verse and pre-chorus section. So those lyrics back to back are like a pair of vagabonds who wave between two passing trains, or the glimpse of a woman's smile through the window in the rain. The pre-chorus lyrics are, I can smell her perfume, I can taste her lips, I can feel the voltage from her fingertips. So I feel here there's a little bit of a shift in tone. But what do you guys think about this last little verse right here?
That's
Vagabond. That first line also speaks to Clockwork Angels. Vagabonds on two passing trains.
Yeah, I think the last two sentences are him being completely tongue-in-cheek, him being completely satirical, and going, "Oh yeah, you can smell her perfume, you can taste her lips, and feel the voltage on her fingertips while you're at it." I think he's basically crying bullshit. I do. That's what I get out of it.
I mean, this little part right here, if you want to talk about Rush lyrics that have aged fantastically, this little pre-chorus right here, this to me is just like the ultimate precursor to like and foreshadowing thing for like online dating.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know it was kind of more like the early 2000s was when online dating like first started like getting a little bit more of a mainstream push. But already like early internet instant messaging, like that was still like something that still kind of happened. And especially today, there's a billion freaking dating apps out there, and anyone that's my age can tell you that they're probably on three of them. And
Or
you
none
know,
of them.
or none of them, if you're have your head on straight. But uh
I say with
it's it's crazy how it's like this lyric right here, I can smell her perfume, I can taste her lips, I can feel the voltage from her fingertips, to me just draws so many images um that weren't even really relevant when the song was made up. The only things I can jump to with these lyrics are just like, just people struggling with the concept of online dating and like kind of just how that whole situation feels like, I can smell their perfume through the screen, but they're not really there until you like meet them in person. And there's such a big degree of separation there. These lyrics are incredibly satirical, but also like, man, I don't know. This to me is just a lyric that, once again, what we were talking about, like they the future went back in time and was like,
Prophetic.
"Hey, you're gonna
Very,
write a song about this."
yes,
Yeah.
Like
very
I'm
prophetic.
I'm
Michael?
genuinely like at a loss for words for it a little bit. Like it's kind of insane to me.
Well, it's insane to me too for the other half of that reason, which is that I met my wife on America Online.
Oh,
Some of you might have to explain to Ryder what America Online was.
and me too.
AOL
AOL.
chat rooms, that's where I started.
AOL, yeah.
Yeah, just hung out in chat rooms and you'd meet people and you would get to know them and you'd graduate to directly messaging them rather than speaking in the chat room where everybody could see it. And then you would graduate from that to phone calls and then meeting in person. So I I dated that way a few times before I met my eventual wife, but that's why this particular chapter or chapter verse speaks to me, because even though I know Neil's talking, satirically about the internet, this was one of the things that he foresaw. He foresaw people being able to connect this way, but he almost in a way that he didn't really believe. Like he didn't he
I
didn't
think
really
it was
buy
the
it.
over reliability of it. I don't think he was damning it per se.
Yeah.
He said in the on the album world premiere, he wasn't damning it per se, but it was, heaven forbid anyone criticize it. So before you go into that territory, don't worry about that. It was over reliance on a lack of, you sounds like you did it just right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope
Yeah.
so. We've been together for more than 20 years, so
Precisely.
There we go.
this
It's amazing.
song always struck a chord with me from that point on, even though I heard it for the first time before that even happened, because at that point in my life, late 90s, graduated college, the internet was still pretty new. You'd get your little disc from AOL and you'd had a certain number of hours for free, and if you go beyond that you had to pay. And even some nights they would close it down for maintenance, so you like it's like shutting down the internet. It's like unheard of kind of thing. It's like, oh, what's going to happen at midnight? Nobody knows. The world's going to end. But it is this concept of that Neil's talking about, where you do start to, especially once you've met the person in the flesh, you do start to sort of get the scents and the smells and the sounds and everything that when you're talking to that person, especially when it's when a relationship is new and fresh and you're head over heels and that kind of thing. So it always spoke to me from that perspective, even though it wasn't necessarily Neil's intention to talk about it that way.
Mm.
These things evolve.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So coming after this, we have a final chorus right here. Same lyrics, our good old net boy, net girl coming back in one more time. And then we end off on an outro. Kind of still within the context of the verse. I think there's a little bit of guitar overdubbing that's happening here, kind of just coloring in, adding a little bit of extra rhythm. And then it ends on not on a fade out, but it ends on this really, really cool delay back and forth with some really neat stereo panning of just the guitar and the bass going back and forth. They pulled this off very well live. If you go back and watch live recordings of it, they did these delay sections very, very well. And I think it's just a super, super cool dynamic way to end the album, kind of revisit a little musical idea from that bridge transitional section. But just, man, very powerful ending, and ending on just a really great riff. But yeah, so that's Virtuality. Do we have any final closing thoughts on this track?
Yeah, sure. I was going to say that ending as well. Great metaphor for sending digital messages. The
Yeah.
delayed on bass.
That's true. It's a back and forth. It's a communication.
Exactly.
That is nice.
If you don't like it and you have an open mind to try it and you've stayed with us this long, find an instrumental version on YouTube. It exists. People have messed with it, and listen to it on instrumental, then put on a live version. If you still don't like it, at least you've tried.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sweet. All right. Well, if that's what everybody's got, I think we can bring this episode to a close. Thank you guys so much for watching episode 219 of Rush Roundtable. Super glad that we finally got the opportunity to talk about Virtuality in a long form discussion. I've been waiting so long to do this episode, and I'm so glad we finally got to do it. Thank you again to the panel for joining me. Don't forget to check out our Ko-fi page, leave us a donation. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell so you know when our other Rush Roundtables are coming out and our other shows like Rye Guys. Check out our sponsors down in the description. Leave a comment down below. What do you think about Virtuality? And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.